MUSC.
And the final thing is that the event is to increase the number of constituents, county citizens vaccinated. But also there would be health informational sessions on COVID-19, the importance of it, actual factual information regarding it, in addition to a number of other programs.
Mr. Brown, when it comes to giving out the cards, who's responsible for giving out the cards?
So Richland County is going to be there, and then the provider that we currently use for some of our current banking needs will be there. So they will load it, but Richland County will ultimately be responsible for making sure the number of cards are given out appropriately and that the process is followed for the citizens to get those cards. So while there will be a vendor there providing the card, it will be Richland County staff ensuring that the cards are given to individuals who qualify.
And so our staff will be responsible for that.
That's correct.
And then if we do not give out all cards, then will we hold them for another round of vaccinations? What's the plan for if I'm very hopeful that we're going to give them all out. But if we do not, in the case that we do not, what's our plan?
Right. So if all of the associated funding, in this case via cards, were not utilized, number one, remember that they can load the card once. So we're not going to go there with loaded cards. We're going to load the funding as necessary. So that's one thing. But if, in fact, there is funding not spent, then we would capture that funding and let the committee know that we gave out 50, gift cards or 25 or however many it is, and that of that funding, here's how much money was left over. And it will come back to this committee, but the staff will not just arbitrarily use it or go out and just do something else with it.
Oh, absolutely. I feel very confident that you will not do that. But, I was just kind of fast forwarding because we know that we said this is a pilot site. So if we have anything left over, there's shots number 2. If this is a great event and we're able to do it in another location, then we'll just have that. But I want to make sure we have a running tab.
I just wanted, when we started planning for this event, the event is a month event, because on October the 30th, you do the first initiative, and then in 2 weeks later, you come back for the second one. So there is another one planned, and we talked about this before, for November the 1st or 2nd, I'm not sure the exact date, for this particular initiative. So it was always thought to be a two-pronged initiative.
No, I think we initially we said that definitely the first shot, we knew that. The first shot, we were going to do that, but we did, I do know that we had conversations about the second shot, and so we had even made mention, I think, about making sure that we spread the funds out, but definitely we can entertain if this committee wants to put more funds towards the second shot. I do think that it would be, definitely funds well spent if that's something that we would like to do. But that's not, the 2 part we didn't vote on. We voted on the initial portion.
That's true, because I put, and we're just having a misunderstanding here, because I made a motion that I withdrew it to put additional funding in for the second part. But I'm not going to argue the point here, and when that time's come, we can deal with it.
Absolutely. Yeah, we can definitely have the clerk to look at the minutes to see where we are with that, and we can revisit it. Is there anything further with the initiative, with the incentive program, Mr. Brown?
No, ma'am. That is the update on the incentive program. So vendor is available. Staff is going to be on site and responsible for the funding and the passing out of the cards. Any unused funding will remain in the coffers of Richland County, and we'll come back to this committee and report on the success of the event.
And let's move on to item 4B. Any update there?
Yeah, there are no updates on the infomercial. Ideally, what we were simply talking about doing was trying to get Richland County faces out before the people about getting vaccinated. I know there's still a lot of push for vaccinations across the nation and locally in our community. We were just trying to put Richland County faces on that. So I know that our main video guy, he's going to be out for right now. So, but it's still something that COVID's not going away. We can still look at doing it. We just won't be doing it right now.
Is it a possibility to outsource this, given that we don't, our videographer is out, to be able to outsource this to keep the ball moving? Because I think that even we know that our staff have the normal day-to-day Richland County public information, but if we have, this is something I think that perhaps our funds would be able to utilize if we wanted to outsource that to keep that portion moving, if it is something that the committee wishes to continue in that effort.
Yeah, we can certainly get some quotes for that. And yes, the communication of getting vaccinated, the communication of reducing spread, the education of COVID-19, all of that would be eligible for this funding to be spent. So it is certainly a possibility.
Is there anything from Ms. McBride?
Yes, just to add with the infomercial, it might be interesting or good to at least consider, since we have the vaccination drive going on the 30th, and hopefully there'll be a lot of people there getting vaccinated, to encourage others, if we decide to move this to other areas, to have maybe do our interview or our video with some of those people that could also be a part of this.
Okay, that's a good idea.
I think that's a great idea, to capture some live footage on that day, and maybe perhaps we can share it.
Okay.
If there's not anything further with item 4B, let's move on to our rescue plan funding. Mr. Brown, if you will, just go through A through D, if you like.
Sure. So last night, actually, I had mentioned in the council's packet, I thought what you have on your page 1 that you're showing there of the packet I provided, this was supposed to be included. So I take responsibility if that wasn't included in my original submission. But this shows the summary of the funding that's been spent so far related to COVID ARP funding. So we talked about ultimately that Richland County is expected to be awarded $80 million in the form of 2 different tranches, is what the word is that is being used. We received our first $40 million, which is what we have been utilizing so far, and then we would expect to receive the second $40 million sometime around mid-22. So the breakdown, as you can see there, shows we talked about from the budget standpoint, there were organizations that we felt would qualify, that you had already approved for in the budget, but they would be eligible for utilization of ARP funding rather than general fund dollars. You approved that, and that came to a total of $1,706,439. Then we did the employee stipends. You can see the total there. That included all of the stipends that you did originally. Then we did the security and safety equipment associated with Alvin S. Glenn. That you can see that amount there is listed over $3 million. And then you did the employee stipends recently. That was for the folks who had worked a modified schedule, some in person and some remote. That came to be $660,000. So the total allocated so far, you can see, is $12,845,339. So of the remaining $80 million total that the county is expected to receive, that leaves $67,910,973. So that's what you're looking at now of your available funds. So I want to provide that to you. And again, I will send this sheet out to full council again, because I intended for it to be in the packet for full council. But that shows you where you are right now. Now, moving on through the items below that, the first item, which is the grants management software, and I want to say in the packet that you have now, all of these items were previously in the last packet. However, we didn't get a chance to get time to go through everything, and then it was kind of jumbled where it was in the packet. So what I simply did was I extricated those documents out and placed them here in the order of the agenda. So these are all previously given documents. But the first item, we're not requesting any funding today. We do want to communicate to this body that we believe that grant management software is going to be critical for us to continue to manage these dollars, both not only these ARP funds, but really all of the funding that the county receives through grants. Right now, we don't have a unified software. That's not one system talking to across the different departments, and we would like to do that. So I don't have a dollar amount there, but I want to keep that top of mind for you, that we will be coming back to you asking for the support of that grant management software. But you have the briefing document that expresses the need and explains why we're requesting that. And if there are no questions, I'll move on to get it to where we're actually starting to ask you for money. All right. So if you go to page 4 of 15, that speaks to the HVAC and ventilation system, which is item 5B. And so here what you have is one of the fundamental core areas that ARP dollars is allowed to be used for, and that is your ventilation. So what we want to do is we want to upgrade the ventilation system at these two facilities that we're occupying right now, 2000 Hampton and 2020 Hampton. I understand that these systems are, as you look in the briefing document, are older systems, and these ARP dollars will allow us to upgrade those systems, put systems in these facilities that would allow for the better flow of ventilation and circulation of air, which is going to improve the quality that we're sitting in right now. So I don't want to get into anything non-positive, but if you've been in your office long enough, and some of these offices, you will notice little particles. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with those particles. I'm just saying, in general, that's not something that you would expect from your ventilation system. So we are requesting, the staff recommendation is to approve or allocate $5.2 million in American Rescue Plan funding to replace the HVAC and ventilation system. And in addition to that, one of the things that you have, and you've probably received concerns about this throughout the years, that something else that affects the environment within the facility is if you have water intrusion. So if you have water intrusion coming in through the roof, sitting in the offices, then that potentially creates the opportunity for other conditions that are not conducive. I'm not going to use the word, because I don't want anybody to go back and say the county has that issue, but it can create the conditions which lead to that to grow. And so we know we have water intrusion issues. We know it's repetitive anytime you get a hard rain. And so we are asking for that $5.2 million to take care of the HVAC and the roof, because, again, if you're taking care of the HVAC, but then you're not solving the issue of the water intrusion, then you're not getting the benefit of the ventilation system. You're just creating the environment for that word we don't want to use to grow and fester. So that's the first request of staff, is for HVAC and roof, and to use ARP funding, which will allow us, members of the committee, to not use CIP money. So you could take that money and use it for some other purpose that you want to use it for, which gives you the flexibility there. So that's why we believe this is a appropriate request, and we'll ask for the committee's approval.
So at this time, we do need to have a recommendation or to send back to full council. So we'll need a motion to.
Mr. Brown, now we have assessed the conditions and viability of this particular building, correct? Because, there was a recommendation one time before to tear it down, not long ago. So we want to make sure, as we spend this, I didn't agree with that, but I'm simply saying, let's assure ourselves that, our building's in good shape and it's worth putting the money into it for this system.
Good question, Mr. Chair. So the short answer is, my understanding is that because there were other plans that you wanted to potentially utilize, but it was not because the building was not suitable for habitation, because if that were the case, we should not be sitting here right now. Okay. Okay. Yes. Yes, sir.
Madam Chair, I'm going to move to accept the staff's recommendation. But prior to that motion, I think this is a good use of the funds, but I think in the future, and looking at our funding, we said that we were going to use citizens' input and be a part. And I don't mean the general surveys. I don't like those. I'm talking about real citizens. Not that they're not real citizens' input, but to have maybe a little committee of people that would help us make those decisions. And I know that is one of the prototypes used throughout other states and counties. So I move, based on that, I move to approve staff's recommendation for the HVAC system, ventilation system here on Hampton Street.
I'll second that.
And properly second, is there any further discussion?
Madam Chair.
You recognize Ms. Newton.
Thank you. I think that it is important to fix the ventilation, as that's one of the proven mitigation strategies for COVID. I'm going to be abstaining from this item. Apparently, Mr. Brown emailed these supporting documents, but I guess I missed them and haven't reviewed them, and so don't want to vote in that regard. But I do want to echo Ms. McBride's comments in terms of the process that we use moving forward with these funds. And also, again, just want to make sure that we are looking comprehensively, because the fact of the matter is, if we looked at all of our needs across the county, they would exceed the amount of ARP funds that we have. So just want to make sure that while we're prioritizing, that we're really looking across all the needs of the community and don't end up in a situation where we've expended so much funds on things that are important, but that we've neglected some other priorities that we might want to also have considered. Thank you.
So to that point, I spoke to Mr. Brown, and we did have conversation about the community input that we did receive through the surveys, and I found the results to be quite interesting. But we did also have further conversation as to really prioritizing these items that we need to take care of in our county. But some things, and Mr. Brown, I'll let you speak more to it, but some of these items, we are somewhat in a holding pattern because we don't have the final authorization as to how Treasury is allowing us to use our funds. So the staff, I believe the staff has given us something that of some items that we feel is priority at this point, but I definitely don't want to speak for you, Mr. Brown.
Sure, and I kind of, sometimes when people make good points, I hate to speak behind them because I understand completely what Ms. Newton is saying, and she's right. From the beginning, I said this $80 million could easily be utilized for county-specific needs alone. And when I say county, I mean county as an organization. But I know that's not the desire because we've talked about that as a county council and committee. So what we are doing here is we are tackling those areas where we know the long-term sustainability of what we're trying to accomplish will be best utilized by addressing these particular needs that have kind of gone unaddressed. So absolutely, Ms. Newton, I hear what you're saying. And to your point, I don't want to sit here and say that we're never going to ask for anything else from these ARP dollars, but what we've kind of lined out here is what we've identified as the priorities from an organizational standpoint, and we knew that from there, whatever the council wished to do, we wanted to go ahead and just bring that to your attention up front as you make your decision. So when we get through these recommendations this afternoon, if the council and the committee approves these things, you'll be looking at remaining looking forward to staff coming back saying staff is asking for something. But yes, ma'am, Ms. Newton, I hear you and about the needs that you're trying to express and making sure we're looking comprehensively. And these are, again, the staff particular designations that we thought were priorities. So thank you, and I hate to even say anything after she spoke.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Is there any further discussion? If not, Ms. Only, if you will, call for the vote.
McBride?
Yes.
Livingston?
Yes.
Barron?
Yes.
Newton?
Abstain.
Motion passes.
So moving to item C on the agenda, 5C, you can turn to page, I believe it's page 12 out of 15 of your packet. This is the utilities delinquent receivables item. And in short, what this request is that our utility system, unfortunately, like many other agencies in the county, has individuals who have been impacted by COVID-19 who are unable to pay their utilities. So we have the ability, using the loss section of our ARP dollars, to account for that bad debt, those unpaid funds, those greater than 90-day receivables that are outstanding. And so what we're asking the county to do through this process is to approve up to $1 million in American Rescue Plan lost revenue funds to recover utility bad debt brought on by the pandemic. If you recall, Richland County's utility system is a ratepayer system, and we have an interest revenue bond that backs that up. And what that means is that we have associated rates that we charge in order to make sure we meet that debt. So that is a payment that we must make. And one of the things we have identified is that potentially without these fundings, you're going to be in a hole with that system. So this allows us to recover and not be in the hole so that we can actually continue to keep rates at a sustainable level, at least for right now. I was going to say reasonable, but I don't want to make a comment about the rates themselves being where they are. So that's why the request is before you, because we need to make sure that we can meet our utility rate covenants. And so we're asking for that with this particular request from staff.
Right. Ron, for clarification, now we had the emergency rental assistance money, which paid for utilities, but this particular component was not a part of that rental and utilities assistance funding.
Right. This is not dealing with individuals, and so you're right. That's a separate thing. ERP money, totally separate. This is a part of the American Rescue Plan funding, not the emergency rental assistance funding. So separate pots.
And the American rental assistance funding could not be used for this.
No, we cannot use that.
Okay.
We cannot turn around and take money from that fund and then use it for the purposes like we're doing here,
so,
if this is approved.
Right. So these funds are to help assist residents also, or is this just...
These funds are to recover our losses as a result of folks not being able to pay their bills.
Okay, so
these are recovery dollars for the county's loss of revenue because individuals were not able to pay because of their impact of COVID-19.
Okay, and so you understand where I was going, because they couldn't pay their bill. We lost revenues because they couldn't pay the bill.
Correct.
The citizens couldn't. But at the same time, I just want to make sure clear. At the same time, those citizens could have applied for funding to pay the county. They could not have with the rental assistance and utility fund.
There was nobody you were not prohibited from applying for individual assistance to pay your bill if it were a county bill.
Yeah.
So, yes,
but they didn't do it.
I don't know if they did or didn't.
Uh-huh.
I'm saying that in total, you suffered a loss in utility revenue, and part of the calculation that you're allowed to utilize with the American Rescue Plan dollars is a lost revenue calculation.
I understand that, but it seems like the two programs are similar, but they did not use that, the American Rental Assistance Program. And so in order to help the county, because we did pay those utilities, we're using these funds.
I completely understand what you're asking. I just can't make one contingent on the other, because you may have and you may not have. But I understand what you're trying to ask, Ms. McBride.
Yeah, but it doesn't ask.
Similar to, I think, what Ms. McBride's getting at, too, is, see, I was under the assumption that a lot of these folks are the folks who are actually getting the utility assistance, whereby they could have paid us for our system, for using our system.
But the assumption would be that all of the folks that applied are utilities, have Richland County utilities.
No, but I'm just referring to the Richland County ones right now, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, again, the eligibility could be potentially there, but we can't necessarily tie the two together because it's very possible. If you remember the numbers we looked at yesterday, of the 14,000 people, the 2,000 received funding, and so if those 2,000 did not have the Richland County utilities, as their primary behind their rent and their utilities, that funding they received could have been all rent. Or that funding they received could have been partial rent, partial, other utilities, including water, sewer, and any of the other eligible utilities. So that's why I'm saying we want to be careful in describing that.
I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure that they could have been used if they had decided to use them, but I understand the need for it.
Gotcha.
Okay.
So the other component is this is not exclusive to renters. This is your utility. So if you have a homeowner who, for whatever reason couldn't pay their utilities, this also includes them. So it's not limited to those who were just in a rental situation.
That's a good
So with the particular question that you asked about how do we work with utility providers while they are going through the emergency rental assistance program, many of the providers have a direct connection with us. They have worked with us not to cut people off when they know they're in process and potentially have been approved. Some of those we have worked out, giving them direct payments once they are hold off on that. So there's been direct connections with all of our utility providers for those renters who have been approved for funding and they're waiting on the funding.
Right, but this is...
Yes, this is specific to saying
Health systems.
Richland County utilities, that we are not disconnecting. We suspended disconnections some time ago, and while others may have started again, we never have. So we wanted to make sure that if Richland County was going to do that, since it was a step taken by the council, that we wanted to make sure it goes back through council so that it is clear that, yes, staff, we know that potentially now people may get disconnected for non-payment of services. We know that people may have late fees, and that's part of the process, and we understand, do the job. But right now that's not happening, so that's what I wanted to brief you on.
But I still think it applies to having rental assistance money available, because they still could, the constituents and citizens still could have used those funds to pay us, to pay the county.
They would be eligible to do that, yes, ma'am.
So that's why I'm saying, what is the tie-in between that process still being open for citizens to apply for funds so that even if it's Richland County or whether it's some other entity, that they could get the money to keep from being disconnected, and how we're coordinating that? That's my question.
Sure. Well, the good thing for them is, from a Richland County side, they don't have to coordinate because they're not getting disconnected no matter what. Because right now...
I understand that, Mr.
Okay.
Brown, but I'm just saying, if you decide not to continue that process, then will you take into consideration that the funding is still open or out there?
Yes,
That's
ma'am.
my question.
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Anything further on this item?
No, ma'am. No further on that item.
So, item D?
So the item D, and what you have there is an executive summary of the American Rescue Plan survey that we sent out and got feedback on, which is part of what we said we would do to the Treasury. We told them as a part of our plan, we would get feedback from the community on areas that they thought should be focused on. And so what you have here in your packet, page 14 of 15, is some of those results. So I'll go out and list these for individuals who are not able to look at this document right now. But the top 10 responses for priorities included, number one, services for abused and neglected children. So 66% of those respondents communicated that was a top priority. Street improvements came in at 65%. Mental health came in at 64%. Support services came in at 63%, roughly a 64 round up. Transitional housing came in at 63%. Emergency shelters at 62%. Permanent housing at 61%. Broadband infrastructure at 61%. Services for victims of domestic violence at 61%. And then veterans at 58%. Now, again, these are just the top 10. If you look down right below that, you will see, again, in the 50% range, special housing for the elderly, safety of your neighborhood during the day, youth services, day care services, special needs services, rental assistance, substance abuse, and flood and drain improvements, all above equal to the 50% mark. So the interesting thing is a lot of these particular areas are areas that are have been come up in conversation that the council has had, committees have had, and citizens have basically reaffirmed that through some of this surveying. So when you look at this, again, it gives you an opportunity to say, as the county considers how it's going to spend American Rescue Plan dollars, what are some of the voices out there saying? And this is one way we captured some of the voices. It doesn't represent everybody's voice, but it represents a communal voice. And you can see some of those things are priorities that this very council has already identified. So, but again, these are designed to be platforms for the council to utilize as it considers how it will spend additional ARP dollars. So the one thing I will do is I will go through some of the requests that have come through. And I know we're not going to get into the details of those requests right now, but I want to talk to you about some of the agencies and the amount of funding that they've requested through this input process. Does not mean that anything's been turned in or they're going through an approval process. It's just a part of the input that we received. Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell me how many people respond to these surveys?
Sure. Let me see if Mr. Gaither can tell me that from a grants department. Give me just a moment. Okay. Understood. So what Mr. Gaither was trying to remind me of is that the survey didn't close. So, but at the time of this, it was 700 respondents.
Oh, it's still open.
Correct. Because we talked about, and I know I don't want to confuse things, but we talked about quarterly updates that we had to make to Treasury. So again, we didn't think that it was going to be a one-time scenario where information only flowed at one time. We thought there may be conversations that then turned into specific projects that then turned into specific areas of focus. And so that's how we've been considering this whole process.
That's a good number for surveys.
Very good number.
Okay.
You may continue, Mr. Brown.
So on page 14 of 15, you will see, I'm sorry, it's page 15 of 15. You will see a list of organizations that through this process communicated to the county that, hey, we believe that we have a need that can be serviced utilizing ARP dollars, and they submitted information to the county. And the way this came about is because you may all have received either emails or phone calls saying, how do I apply for ARP funding from the county? And there's not an application. But what we said was if we were receiving input, submit that input, and we will bring that before the prospective bodies, committees, and council. So the Midlands Fatherhood Coalition / ARC, they made a request for $170,000. And again, we're not going to get into the details of what the requests are today, but we will provide you that information at a future time. Eau Claire Cooperative Health Center, they made a request for $2 million in funding. Food Share South Carolina made a request for $459,720. I believe the Affordable Housing Trust Fund recommendation for More Justice was $10 million. There was a request, Midlands Technical College, for an ARP proposal, which would allow basically free college for Richland County high school graduates, which roughly came to a request of about $12.4 million. Homeless No More, Community Center / Hub for at-risk and homeless families, made a request for $4.5 million. And there was also maybe an additional to that, unless this is a double, affordable housing for families at risk of homelessness with children at $6 million. And then the Columbia Food Policy Committee made a request for $150,000, and there may be some other ones that have come in since we put this together that are out there. So
what about building better communities?
I don't know if they made it a specific request right now, Mr. Livingston, for funding, but if you're aware of that, I mean, you can speak to it. Because again, this might not represent.
They're on the list.
Oh, did I miss them on here?
One next to
That's the second one on the list there, yeah.
Oh, I know what I'm looking at. You're looking at the total list. I'm looking at people who actually gave a particular amount. Okay, I think that's the difference between what you're looking at and what I'm looking at.
And Columbia Food Policy Committee was what?
$150,000.
Okay. Thank you.
And I'll check and make sure Building Better Communities didn't have an amount, but I believe these are specified amounts, but I'll check. We may have just overlooked that one.
Ms. McBride, you recognize.
Mr. Rapp,
Yes, ma'am.
that just out to the county stating that they were interested. And there was not any type of RFP or any type of request for proposals that went out. So
Correct.
these were entities that were knowledgeable of the funding and decided to request, to make a request to.
That's correct. They had either engaged the county through watching us to have discussions or had some understanding that ARP fund dollars was being sent out to various agencies. Yes, ma'am, Ms. McBride.
I would be very concerned. I'm glad because I even recommended some that called me that's on this list. But I would be very concerned to just use this list and not have the opportunity to have a request for proposal should we decide to go this way for others to apply and then look at a lot of guidelines in terms of the funding amounts would have to be developed. But
Yes,
thank you for sharing it.
Absolutely. And to your point, Madam Chair, if I may, a part of the conversation we had was just that. What about individuals, Ms. Barron just asked me directly, she said, what about individuals who are not aware that you may be having this funding available? And so we just had a brief discussion about whether or not, what that looks like. Does staff go out and communicate that the county has available funding and in what parameters? So that would be something that a discussion like this would kind of bleed out, how we go about communicating so that folks will know, and then looking at some kind of filter as you decide, what you tick mark off in your matrix, if you will, for what qualifies for what you're going to fund.
Here is the last comment.
Okay, sure.
And all of that will be based on our previous conversations regarding guidance from full council and what I've discussed and what Ms. Newton discussed today in terms of our strategic planning and development. And of course, our chair has also discussed the same thing. So all that will be a part of that strategic plan.
Okay.
That's what I'm assuming.
Yeah, so one of the conversation that I had with Mr. Brown was that, and Mr. Brown, I know you share these same sentiments, and that is that we cannot forget about just the moms and pops that have these small businesses, have newer nonprofits, and so we have to be able to make sure that there's an equitable process so the information is disseminated out to them, and then they know what the expectation is. And so I've asked Mr. Brown to really look into a process that we can do this. I know the OBO staff is here today. They've already started engaging in the community with our small businesses in their grant funds, but perhaps it is that we can take some of these funds and further extend the arm of what they're already doing in the business community, and then looking at nonprofits in a different pocket. But you have some astronomical numbers of requests, $10 million. Well, I would rather give 10 people $10 million than to give one organization $10 million. I think we can spread our wealth and do much more in connecting to what this survey has brought forth. And Mr. Gaither, thank you so much. An excellent job. But in taking this information and connecting what the citizens have already said and then marrying it to what we are going to say as our strategic plan and pushing forth priorities as a county as a whole. I think that's where we can really work to expend these funds and have a greater impact for our community. I'm just, as we've sat here and met today, thinking even more about, I think it was the Blue Ribbon, is it the Blue Ribbon Committee? That we need to look at that and engage our community even further. Perhaps they could serve as, as our grant readers to see. But this is an opportunity for us, as you mentioned earlier, with the HVAC system. We can spend funds out of someone else's wallet, and ours will still be okay. And so it's almost Christmas. It's Christmas in October for Richland County, where we can do some great things that we wouldn't traditionally be able to do. But as we look forward, for these opportunities, I really want us to make sure that everybody has a chance if they want it. Because there are a lot of people that they don't know that we have this money. They're not getting the weekly review. They don't even know what that is. So we have to take it to them. Mr. Livingston?
Now, what would be helpful for me, because I'm sure we're going to probably get some more of these requests, is to try to put them in some kind of category. So that way, if I got, 4 individuals want to do something around food security, I'd like to be able to kind of look at that as one part and figure out how to make that work, or whether one is doing something that the other, in other words, are they both talking about doing the same thing or not, and that kind of thing. The categories like food security, then you got several housing, then you got healthcare, education, just like 4 or 5 broad categories, for me, would be real helpful. So that way I don't have to worry about duplication, and I can compare and contrast the benefit each one of them is doing in that area.
All right, sir, no problem. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I think that this is where, when we reconvene, this is where we need to really put a lot of our energy there. Also, there are a couple of other items that we mentioned prior, just in some other conversations that we need to put our energy towards to make sure that, because we've kind of gotten over the hump here, but we're still working, once we get the infomercial rolling, but now we're in the heat of really getting these funds out and making the dollars work. Anything further about the funding opportunities for nonprofits and businesses?
So only one thing, you all may recall that we were saying that we thought, according to the Treasury, that they were saying that they would have final guidance out in September. Well, here we are in October, and there's no final guidance. Right now, we have team members who are attending the Government Financial Officers Association conference, and they're discussing conversations they've had with Treasury. And at this point in time, Treasury sounds like they're looking at guidance now being finalized maybe sometime closer to December. So why am I saying that? Well, when you start looking at the timelines associated with obligating funds and spending funds, waiting on that final guidance it pushes us, our timeline. It crunches us a little bit. So just want to remind everyone that we are still awaiting final guidance. It has not been issued by the U.S. Treasury. And as a result of that, some of the broader things that we might want to accomplish that might require further consideration, we still don't have that final guidance. So other than that, Madam Chair, that's it.
Mr. Bratton and Mr. Lee.
First of all, thank you for the survey and for pushing it, Madam Chair, because this is what we need in order to establish priorities in terms of where the funding will go as we continue to look at that process. And the second thing with the Treasury, one thing about it, that these aren't emergency funds right here that we're talking about. So I can't recall the time span, but there is more time that we have in terms of how these funds are, how we develop them, and the expenditures of the funds. Do you remember the dates?
Yes, ma'am. They have to be obligated by 2024 and have to be spent by 2026.
So that provides us time for some really good planning, too. Thank you.
Mr. Livingston.
I'm sure there'll be some more proposals back on page 15. How are we going to evaluate those?
That's a good. We have not officially established that, so there's probably a 2-part answer to your question. One, we do have a framework in which we think it would be potentially helpful for the committee to look at things, but that hasn't been adopted by the committee or by council. Secondly, in terms of a committee of persons like the Blue Ribbon Committee, I think you all have talked about that, but that has also not been, formalized. In terms of that, we want to establish a committee that would be comprised of, so many persons, and I think that's what you all did with that particular initiative. So, but to to your point, Mr. Livingston, we have a framework, and we are certainly more than willing to work with any community committee that the council committee or council finds appropriate.
I like what's this.
And that this list, I keep going back to this list, this list is just a partial list of this main map, because we have to make this open. We have to be very transparent, and we have to have a really good outreach so that those that do not normally apply for these grants will have that same opportunity. I just wanted to reiterate that.
Yes, ma'am.
Further, Mr. Brown?
No, ma'am, that concludes all of the information shared.
Any further from the committee? If not, our next order of business is adjournment.
Second that.
McBride,
Yes?
Livingston, Barron,
Yes?
Newton.
Yes?
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Madam Chair? You